At 27, I was a virgin and a flight attendant. My life was about to change on a flight. A man, a magnetic millionaire, boarded. What he did next would haunt me forever. The aircraft was packed, the hum of conversations filled the cabin, but for me, everything faded into the background as I saw him, tall, sharp features, an air of power. He wasn't just any passenger. This was a man who seemed to command attention without uttering a word. And as fate would have it, he was seated in my section. Little did I know, this flight would alter my life forever. I had always prided myself on being professional, keeping a smile on my face no matter the situation. But that smile faltered when I locked eyes with him. It wasn't the way he looked at me, no, it was something deeper. Something magnetic. It was as if he saw straight through me, peeling back layers of who I thought I was, exposing the vulnerable parts one kept hidden. The attraction was instant, undeniable, but I knew my duty: serve the passengers, stay professional, keep the distance. As the flight progressed, I couldn't help but notice how he kept looking at me, his gaze never straying far. Every time I walked past, I felt the intensity of his stare. But it wasn't just his eyes, it was the way he carried himself, the confidence in his every movement. There was something almost otherworldly about him, as if he wasn't bound by the same rules as everyone else. He was a millionaire, no doubt about it, but there was something deeper, something darker, lurking behind his flawless demeanor. Eventually, he spoke to me, his voice low, smooth, almost hypnotic. "I'll need a drink," he said, his tone laced with a command that was impossible to ignore. But it wasn't just the request. It was how he said it, as though he already knew that I would get it for him, that I had no choice. I nodded, instinctively reaching for the drink cart, trying to ignore the way my heart was racing. I was doing my job, but the tension between us was palpable. When I returned with his drink, he thanked me. "I've been watching you," he said, his words simple, but loaded with meaning. I froze for a moment, unsure of how to respond. Was he flirting with me? Or was there something more to his words? "You have a certain charm," he added, his lips curling into a half-smile. That smile, oh, that smile, was enough to make my knees weak. I tried to shake it off, retreating back into my duties, but the encounter stayed with me, lingering like an electric current in the air. I couldn't concentrate. I couldn't breathe. Every time I looked back at him, I saw something different in his eyes, a flicker of something darker, something dangerous. It was as if he was testing me, pulling me into his world without me even realizing it. He wasn't just some rich, arrogant man. No, there was more to him. And I couldn't figure it out. The rest of the flight passed in a blur, but his presence never left me. I tried to avoid his gaze, to pretend that I wasn't affected, but the pull was too strong. I could feel him watching me even when I wasn't looking. I felt like I was playing a game I didn't understand, one where the rules kept changing, and I was always one step behind. As the flight began its descent, he called me over to him once again. This time, his voice was softer, more intimate. "Come sit with me," he said, his eyes intense, as if this request was something he had been planning for a long time. I hesitated, but there was something in his... He smiled again, that dangerous smile. "What if I told you that what I want is you?" he replied, his voice dripping with promise. "But not just for tonight. I want you to come with me. I want you to see the world through my eyes. To understand the power I hold." I wanted to protest, to pull away, but something inside me was drawn to him. It was like I couldn't resist. His words, his presence, they held me captive in ways I couldn't explain. And that's when it hit me. He wasn't just trying to seduce me, he was trying to pull me into his world. A world of power, of luxury, of a life I couldn't even begin to imagine. The rest of the flight was a blur. All I could think about was what he had said, how he wanted me to see the world through his eyes. The thought both terrified and thrilled me. I had always lived a simple life, focused on my job, my routines. But he was offering me something I couldn't ignore. He was offering me a glimpse into a life of power, of wealth, of influence. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I didn't just want to know what he had to offer, I wanted to be a part of it. As we landed, he stood up, his movement slow and deliberate, like a man who knew the effect he had on people. "You'll come with me," he said, more a statement than a question. I nodded, unable to speak, lost in the whirlwind of thoughts racing through my mind. What was I about to do? I climbed into the back seat beside him, my heart pounding in my chest. The driver didn't ask where we were going, he already knew. The silence between us was thick with unspoken words, with promises and secrets I couldn't yet understand. All I knew was that I had stepped into a world I wasn't prepared for, a world where love was more dangerous than I could ever have imagined. As the car sped away, I realized something: I was no longer the same person who had boarded that flight. The journey I had started on that plane was far from over, and I had no idea where it would lead. But one thing was certain: my life, my world, everything I knew, was about to be shattered. And it would never be the same again. The love I had always sought, the love I had dreamed of, was now in my grasp. But it wasn't the kind of love I had ever imagined. It was the kind of love that consumes, that destroys, that pulls you in and doesn't let go. And I had just stepped into the center of it. The car ride felt like an eternity. Time stretched and warped around me as I sat beside him, the man whose presence had already infiltrated every part of my being. The world outside the tinted windows blurred, as if the city itself couldn't exist in the reality that was unfolding between us. The door opened, and the cold night air rushed in, sharp against my skin, snapping me back to reality. His hand extended toward me, his fingers long and elegant, urging me to take them. My breath caught in my throat. Without thinking, I placed my hand in his. He didn't let go as he guided me out of the car and into a building that seemed to pulse with energy. The architecture was grand, modern, and intimidating, and the lobby seemed to swallow us whole as we moved through it, his presence commanding the space, turning heads as we passed. I felt like a stranger in this world, like I didn't belong here, and yet, it was impossible to resist. His grip on me was unyielding, pulling me deeper into his domain. We took the elevator to a higher floor, and I didn't question the directions or the fact that I was following him into the unknown. The elevator doors opened to reveal an enormous penthouse, sprawling across the top of the building with panoramic views of the city below. The space was sleek, luxurious, and strangely cold, despite the lavishness of its design. It was the kind of place you'd expect to see in a movie, a place where the wealthy and powerful come to escape the world. "Make yourself comfortable," he said, his voice calm, but still with that undeniable edge to it. His eyes, though, were watching me with a quiet intensity, as though he were studying me, figuring out how to draw me further into his world. His gaze felt like a touch, sending a shiver down my spine. I nodded but didn't move. The silence that followed stretched between us like a chasm, an unspoken question hanging in the air: what now? My mind was spinning, unsure of what to expect. He moved to the bar and poured a drink, and I watched him, mesmerized by the ease with which he commanded the room. "Do you want a drink?" he asked, his voice low. I nodded again, unable to speak. It was a fleeting touch, but it felt like an electric shock, jolting through my veins, reminding me that I was no longer in control of this situation. As I sipped the drink, the tension between us seemed to grow. He studied me in a way that made me feel both exposed and protected at the same time. There was something about his presence, something so magnetic, so undeniable, that I found myself drawn to him, unable to break free from the pull. I had known him for less than a day, yet it felt like I had known him forever. And then, with no warning, he took a step closer. His hand brushed against my cheek, his fingers warm against my skin. My breath caught in my throat, and I froze. The heat between us was unbearable, and I could feel the weight of his gaze as he moved even closer. He didn't speak, just looked at me with an intensity that was almost suffocating. His lips parted slightly, and for a moment, everything else faded away. Before I could stop myself, I leaned in, my lips meeting his. It was a kiss that felt like destiny, like everything that had led up to this moment had been building to this one point. His lips were soft but demanding, and as he deepened the kiss, I felt the world slip away. But it was not just desire that pulsed between us. There was something darker, more dangerous beneath the surface, a promise of something far beyond a simple kiss. And as he pulled back, his eyes darkened with something I couldn't quite place. "You have no idea what you've just stepped into," he said, his voice low and almost threatening. I swallowed hard, unsure of how to respond. What had I stepped into? What was I really getting involved in? Before I could formulate a response, he turned away, his back to me now. "Stay here." "I'll be right back," he instructed. There was no need for a reason, no need for explanation. He simply turned, disappearing down a hallway that seemed to stretch on forever, the sound of his footsteps fading into the distance. Left alone in the vast penthouse, I felt the weight of the situation settle on my shoulders. What was he hiding? What was I about to uncover? My mind raced, but I couldn't focus. Something about this whole situation felt wrong, yet at the same time, it felt inevitable. I had been drawn into his world, and now there was no turning back. Minutes passed, or maybe hours, I couldn't tell. I was lost in my thoughts, my mind a tangled mess of questions and fears. Then, I heard the sound of footsteps approaching. He returned, but this time, he wasn't alone. A man followed him, tall, imposing, with a presence that matched his own. The newcomer had an air of authority about him, like he belonged to this world in a way I could never understand. They exchanged a few brief words in a language I couldn't place, but it was the way they looked at me that sent a chill down my spine. I wasn't just a passenger anymore. I wasn't just an innocent bystander. I was part of something much larger. The man who had brought me here wasn't just a millionaire. He was something more, something dangerous, and I had just become entangled in his web. As the new man stepped forward, his eyes never left mine. "You've made a dangerous choice," he said, his voice cold and clipped. I didn't speak, unable to form the words. The first man, the millionaire, turned to me with a dark smile. "This is only the beginning," he said, his words like a warning. "I told you, love is dangerous. But now, you're mine." The last thing I remember is the sound of the door closing behind me, sealing me into a world I couldn't escape. I had fallen into his trap, and there was no turning back now.